The sky above the alien colony was heavy and gray. Clouds covered the light and the ground was dry and broken. Once this land had been full of green plants and sweet fruit. But now, there was nothing. The fields were empty, and the rivers were only lines of dust. The aliens were starving. Their bodies were thin, their eyes hollow. Mothers held their children close, but there was no food to give. Fathers searched the land for something to eat, but they returned with nothing. Even the animals of the world had disappeared. Everywhere silence ruled. Only the cries of hungry children cut through the quiet. The colony had lived like this for many months. At first, they hoped the storms would end. They hoped the soil would heal. But nothing changed. The planet itself seemed to be dying. Some whispered that their world had been cursed. Others believed the end of their people was near. And then, something strange happened. On the edge of the colony, near the broken towers of old machines, the guards saw a small figure. At first, they thought it was a trick of the wind. The figure was too small, too fragile to be one of them. As it came closer, the aliens gasped. It was not one of their kind. It was not tall, with shining skin and long arms like them. It was a human child. The guards froze. They had heard stories of humans before. Tiny creatures from a faraway world called Earth, weak, soft, and powerless. How could one survive here? The child stumbled into the colony, his clothes torn, his face dirty. But his eyes were bright, full of curiosity and light. He looked around at the starving people, the broken machines, the empty fields. And he did not look afraid. The aliens whispered among themselves. Is this child lost? Is he food for the beasts? No. Look, he is alone. There is no one else with him. The leaders of the colony came forward. They looked down at the human, their faces hard and sharp. You should not be here, one said. His voice was heavy with despair. This is a dying place. Even we cannot survive here. How can you? But the child did not answer. He only looked at the piles of alien junk scattered across the ground. Old wires, broken metal, shattered glass. To the aliens, this was trash. Useless pieces of a past they could not rebuild. The child walked slowly to the junk. His small hands picked up a bent piece of metal. He turned it over, studying it with quiet focus. Then he dropped it and picked up another. His eyes seemed to shine brighter with each object he touched. The aliens frowned. What is he doing? He plays with garbage while our children starve. Humans are foolish. This one is no different. But one old alien with eyes dim yet wise shook his head. Do not judge too quickly, he whispered. There is something in his gaze, something I have not seen in many seasons. It is the fire of thought. The child did not hear their words. He was busy. He moved from pile to pile, gathering small pieces, arranging them in strange ways. He scratched lines in the dust, drawing shapes. Triangles, circles, arrows. To the aliens, these marks meant nothing. But to the child, they were the start of an idea. The colony watched in silence. Hunger still gnawed at their bones, but now, a new feeling entered their hearts. A small spark of curiosity. Why had this human come? Why did he not cry, or beg, or run in fear? Why did he look at their broken trash as if it was treasure? That night, as the alien children lay weak in their beds, the human child sat alone near the junkyard. The moonlight touched his face, and he worked quietly with his hands. He bent wires, stacked glass, and tied broken parts together with strands of torn cloth. His fingers were small, but they moved with purpose. A storm wind blew across the colony. The aliens hid inside, afraid of the sharp dust that cut like knives. But through the storm they saw the small figure still working, still building something only he understood. And in that moment, whispers began again. Perhaps he is not ordinary. Perhaps he was sent by the stars. Perhaps this child is hope. The human lifted his head. His face was scratched, his hands dirty, but his eyes still glowed with light. He looked at the gray sky as if he could see something beyond it, something brighter. And so, in the darkest hour of the alien colony, when all faith was gone, the story began. Not with a warrior, not with a king, not with a great army. It began with a child. A small, fragile human child who carried nothing but his mind and the courage to see possibility where others saw only trash. The morning after the strange arrival, the colony gathered. The air was thin and sharp, and hunger was still heavy on every face. But today, the talk was not about food. It was about the human child. He sat near the junkyard, his hands busy with wires and broken parts. His movements were calm, almost careful, as if he could already see something that did not yet exist. The aliens stood in a wide circle around him. Their tall frames cast long shadows over the small figure. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, full of doubt and mistrust. One alien mother held her weak child closer and hissed, "Why do we allow this creature here? He is not one of us. He is nothing." A young warrior snarled, "He should be cast out. He brings no food. He brings no strength." But the elder who had spoken the night before lifted a hand. "Wait. Watch. Do not rush." His voice was steady, even though his bones shook from hunger. The child seemed not to notice the angry whispers. He tapped two pieces of metal together, listening to the sound. Then he placed them side by side like puzzle pieces. He squinted, tilted his head, then smiled faintly, as if he had found a secret no one else could see. The aliens grew restless. What is he making? Why does he play with trash? Even our best builders cannot bring food from this junk. How can a child do it? The leader of the colony, tall and stern, stepped forward. His voice was deep and cold. "Human," he said, though he did not know if the child could understand. "You waste time. There is no hope here. Leave your toys. We need food, not games." The child looked up. His eyes were calm, steady. He did not speak their language, but he did not need to. His gaze said everything. "I will not stop." The leader's jaw tightened. His pride burned. To him, this child was an insult, a reminder of weakness. Yet, when he looked into those human eyes, he felt something he had not felt in many cycles, doubt in his own despair. The crowd grew louder. Some shouted for the child to leave. Others begged to give him a chance. The noise rose like thunder until suddenly, clang. The child struck two broken plates together, and the sharp sound cut through the air. Everyone froze. Silence fell again. The human bent closer to his strange collection of parts. His small hands moved quickly, connecting wire to glass, glass to metal, metal to stone. The strange shape on the ground grew larger, more complex. The alien stared, confused. "It looks like a trap." "No, it looks like a toy." "Perhaps it is something more." Hours passed. The sun was weak, hidden behind the gray sky, but the child kept working. He stopped only once when his stomach growled. He looked at the aliens with tired eyes, then simply bent back down and continued. A little alien girl, no older than him, stepped forward from the crowd. Her body was thin, her arms trembling from hunger. She walked slowly, holding a small stone in her hand. She placed it near the child's pile of parts as if offering a gift. The crowd gasped, but the child only smiled gently at her, nodded, and placed the stone carefully into his design. Something shifted in that moment. The crowd grew quiet, less angry, more watchful. The young warrior who had shouted before frowned but did not speak again. The mother holding her child loosened her grip. The elder gave a slow nod as if saying, "Yes, yes. This is how it begins." By nightfall, the child's hands were raw and his face was pale with exhaustion. Yet his invention was starting to take shape. It was no longer a pile of trash. It was something new, something with purpose. The leader returned, standing tall above him. He stared for a long moment, then spoke again. "Human," he said, softer this time. "If you fail, we will not forgive. Our people are dying. Do you understand?" The child looked up once more, His lips pressed together, his small head nodded once. Yes. He understood. The leader turned to his people. His voice carried through the colony. Let the child work. We will wait. And so the first day ended. The human child, tiny and fragile, had not spoken a single word. Yet he had done what no leader, no warrior, no council had managed. He had given the colony something they had not felt in a long, long time. Hope. That night, as the stars hid behind gray clouds, the aliens could not sleep. Hunger still burned in their stomachs, but their minds were full of new questions. Could this child truly build something from nothing? Could a creature so small save an entire world? And deep in their hearts, some of them dared to believe. Because even in the darkest night, the sound of the child's hands working on broken pieces echoed like a promise. The next morning, the colony woke to the sound of metal striking stone. Clink, clink, clink. It echoed through the broken towers, carried by the cold wind. The human child was already working. His small hands were dirty, his face pale, but his eyes were alive with focus. He bent over the growing structure, pulling wires, twisting metal, and fitting glass shards together. The aliens gathered again. Their bodies were weak, but something stronger than hunger pulled them to watch. At first, they thought he built at random. Metal piled on metal, strange shapes pressed into the ground. But slowly they began to see patterns. The parts were not scattered. They connected, like the lines of a map. One alien whispered, "He draws circles in dust. He shapes them with wires." But why? Another shook his head. "He builds nothing useful. It cannot give us food." The leader stood apart, arms crossed, watching in silence. His pride still battled with doubt, but deep inside, he could not look away. The child worked until his fingers shook. Then he stopped, drew again in the dust, and adjusted his design. He was planning something bigger than the pieces themselves. Finally, he stepped back, wiped sweat from his brow, and studied the half-built shape. His eyes shone. It was not finished, but the idea was alive. By midday, the crowd grew restless. A warrior shouted, "Enough, this is foolishness. We starve while he plays with broken things." He marched forward and kicked at the edge of the structure. Metal clattered. Glass cracked. The child gasped. His small hands darted out to shield the fragile pieces. His face twisted, not in fear, but in determination. His eyes blazed as if saying, "Do not touch what you do not understand." The elder's voice rang out. "Stop!" His thin frame shook as he stepped between the warrior and the child. "Can you not see? The boy builds with purpose. His hands are not idle. His mind is sharp. Let him work." The warrior growled but obeyed. The crowd murmured. The child, still silent, bent back down and began repairing the damage without complaint. His patience was unshaken. That evening, the little alien girl who had given him the stone returned. This time she carried a bent shard of mirror. She held it out with trembling hands. The child's face softened. He accepted the mirror gently and placed it carefully into the heart of his design. Then he lifted the mirror, angled it toward the weak sun, and a small beam of light reflected across the dust. The aliens gasped. For a moment, the light seemed alive, bright, almost warm. It cut through the gloom, touching their hollow faces. And though it was only a reflection, it stirred something inside them. The child smiled faintly. Then he set the mirror into place among the wires and glass. The elder's eyes widened. He whispered to himself, "He gathers the sun." Days passed. The structure grew taller, wider. Pieces of broken machines became strange arms reaching toward the sky. Glass shards formed panels. Wires tied them together like veins. Each night the child slept near his creation, curled on the ground, one hand still resting on the metal as if guarding it. And each morning he rose before the aliens and began again. He never spoke. But his silence was not empty. His hands spoke louder than words. They told a story of persistence, of invention, of hope. Some aliens began to believe. They brought him scraps from their homes, rusted tools, broken lamps, shattered crystals. The child accepted each piece with quiet gratitude and found a place for it in his growing design. Others remained doubtful. "This is madness," they muttered. "Food cannot be born from junk." But even they returned each day to watch. Because curiosity had taken root. One evening, as the sun dipped behind gray clouds, the leader approached the child again. He stood tall, his shadow falling across the invention. His voice was low, careful. "What do you make, little one? A trap? A beacon? A toy?" The child paused. His hands hovered over the wires. Then he reached into the dust and drew 3 simple shapes: a circle, an arrow, and a small square box. He pointed to the circle, then to the sky. He pointed to the box, then to the crowd. Finally, he connected them with the arrow. The aliens leaned closer. The elder's eyes widened with understanding. "He means to take the sun and give it to us." Murmurs spread through the colony. Hope, fear, doubt, all mixed together. Could it be true? Could this tiny human turn light into life? That night when the winds howled across the dying land, the aliens gathered in silence. They did not argue, they did not fight. Their eyes were fixed on the half-built invention, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The child lay beside it, asleep, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. His hands were cut, his nails broken, but his face was calm, peaceful. And in that moment, even the leader felt it. A quiet shift. The human child, fragile and small, had not spoken a single word since his arrival. Yet he had already begun to change them. He had given them a plan, not with speeches, not with commands, but with vision. And vision, they realized, was the first step toward survival. The sky grew darker with each passing day. Heavy winds scraped the land, carrying dust that burned the skin. The colony, already weak from hunger, now feared the storms as much as starvation. Yet through it all, the human child did not stop. From sunrise to nightfall, his small hands worked. He tied wires together, polished broken glass, and shaped the strange machine piece by piece. The invention now stood taller than him, with arms of metal reaching out like claws toward the sky. The aliens watched. Some whispered in awe, others muttered in doubt. "This thing will save us," said a hopeful voice. "No," another spat. "It will only waste our time." "Look at him," someone else whispered. "He is only a child. How can he do what we cannot?" The leader remained silent. He stood each day near the edge of the crowd, his sharp eyes never leaving the invention. His pride told him to call it foolish. But something deeper, something older, told him to wait. One evening, as the child adjusted a broken panel of glass, the storm winds grew violent. Dust tore through the colony, rattling the broken towers, screaming like angry spirits. The aliens rushed to hide, covering their children. But the child did not move. He clung to his invention, his small frame shaking as the storm howled. The machine swayed dangerously, pieces tearing loose. A mirror cracked. Wires snapped free. The crowd shouted from their shelters, "Leave it! Save yourself! He will be crushed!" Foolish human. But the child did not leave. His hands grabbed the broken wires, pulling them tight. His face was set, his jaw firm. He would not let the storm take what he had built. The leader stepped forward, his long cloak whipping in the wind. He shouted above the storm, "Child, enough, you will die for nothing." Still, the human did not let go. His small arms strained, his body trembling, but his eyes burned with fire. The storm roared on, tearing at the invention. A large metal piece broke free, crashing to the ground. The child fell with it, his body hitting the dust. The crowd gasped, A moment he lay still. Then slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. His arm shook, blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but his hands reached for the machine again. He began to rebuild even while the storm still raged. The aliens stared in silence. Some wept, others trembled. "He does not stop," whispered the elder. "Not even pain breaks him." The little alien girl who had given him the mirror cried, "Out." She tried to run to him, but her mother held her back. "No, child. He must fight alone." And he did. Hour after hour, through dust and darkness, the human child worked. When the winds finally calmed, the invention was broken, half buried in sand. The child collapsed beside it, his small body limp. The aliens gathered around him. Some shook their heads in pity. Others bowed their heads in shame. "He is mad," the warrior growled. "This thing will never save us." But the elder spoke firmly. "No. Do you not see? Even broken it stands. Even broken he rebuilds. That is strength. That is what we have forgotten." The leader said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the child, lying weak but still alive beside his shattered creation. The next morning, the colony woke to another sound, soft, steady, determined, clink, clink, clink. The child was working again. His face was pale, his hands covered in cuts, but he moved with the same quiet focus as before. He lifted the broken parts, wiped away the dust, and began to rebuild from the ruin. The aliens stared. After all that, he still continues? Why? Because, the elder said, he does not know how to quit. Slowly, something changed. A few aliens stepped forward. They brought scraps of their own, shards of crystal, broken plates of metal, old tools. They placed them beside the child. He looked up at them, his tired eyes shining. Then he nodded once and placed the new pieces carefully into his design. The machine grew again. Not as it was before, but stronger, sharper, more focused. That night, around the fire pits, the colony argued. It is useless. No, it is hope. He will fail. Even if he fails, he has shown us courage. The leader sat apart, silent. In his mind, he remembered the storm, the child's small figure standing against the fury of the wind, refusing to give in. The leader clenched his fist. He hated to admit it, but deep inside he felt respect. By the end of the week, the invention stood once more. Its arms stretched toward the sky, mirrors shining faintly in the dim light, wires connecting like veins of life. The child stepped back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The aliens watched, their hunger forgotten for a moment. The elder whispered, "It is nearly complete." But the warrior shook his head. "And if it fails, what then? We will be fools for believing in him." The leader finally spoke. His voice was low, steady. "Then we are already fools. But if it succeeds..." He paused, his eyes fixed on the human child. "Then this child will have done what none of us could." The wind fell silent. The colony stood waiting, breathless. The invention was not yet finished, but it was close. The child's plan was clear now, something with mirrors, glass, and light, something to turn the sky itself into food. But storms still brewed above, danger still waited, and the colony's doubt had not fully died. The true test was still to come. And when it did, the fate of an entire world would rest in the hands of a fragile human child. The invention stood tall now, rising from the junkyard like a strange tree of metal and glass, its arms stretched wide, mirrors angled toward the sky, wires twisted like roots into the ground. The human child stood before it, his hands trembling from exhaustion, his face pale and thin. Yet his eyes still shone with fire. The aliens gathered, in silence. Hundreds of them stood around the strange structure, their bodies weak, their stomachs empty, their hope balanced on the fragile work of a single child. The leader stepped forward. His voice was cold but heavy with weight. "Human, today you show us truth. Either this will work, or you have wasted our final hope." The child looked up at him. His lips did not speak. but his small head gave a firm nod. The sky was still gray. The sun was faint, hidden behind thin clouds, but the child lifted a cracked mirror, tilted it, and caught a sliver of light. Slowly, carefully, he directed it into the heart of the invention. The mirrors on the structure caught the glow. One by one, they reflected the weak sunlight, bouncing it from glass to glass, until the center of the machine began to glow faintly. The real aliens gasped. The light grew brighter, warmer. For the first time in many seasons, they felt true warmth on their faces. But then, nothing. The glow flickered, then faded. The machine stood silent. The crowd groaned. Some cursed. Others turned away in despair. "It is useless," one shouted. "We believed in trash," cried another. "End this madness." The warrior barked. The leader narrowed his eyes. He clenched his fists, ready to declare failure. But then, the child did something strange. He reached into the dust and picked up a small crystal no bigger than his palm. He placed it into the heart of the invention, where the mirrors met. Then he angled the largest panel one more time. Light poured in, bouncing, gathering, focusing into the crystal. The crystal glowed, first faintly, then brighter, until it burned, with a soft golden light. The child stepped back. His small hands pressed together as if praying. And then, something new happened. From the bottom of the machine, a soft hum began. The wires glowed faintly, carrying the light deeper. A strange mist formed, swirling inside a cracked glass bowl. The aliens leaned forward, eyes wide. The mist grew thicker, brighter, and then slowly solidified into something small and round. The crowd gasped. It was food. Not metal, not ash, not dust, but real food. A small fruit, glowing with golden light. The little alien girl who had given the mirror was pushed forward by the elder. Her hands shook as she stepped to the bowl. She lifted the glowing fruit, staring at it with wide eyes. "Eat," the elder whispered. The girl bit into it. Juice dripped down her chin. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in years, she smiled. The crowd erupted. Gasps, cries, shouts filled the air. "It works. Food. Real food. The human has done it." The leader's stern face cracked with shock. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now burned with awe. The machine glowed brighter. Another fruit formed, then another, then two more. The invention, powered by mirrors and light, was creating food from the very air and dust. The aliens rushed forward, but the elder raised his voice. "Wait, do not destroy it. Let the child guide us." The child nodded, moving carefully among them. He handed each fruit to the weakest ones first. The sick, the starving children, the mothers with no strength left. Each bite brought color back to their faces, strength back to their bodies. The crowd watched, stunned, as life returned to their people. By evening, the machine had filled baskets with glowing fruit. The colony feasted for the first time in many seasons. Laughter echoed through the broken towers. Children played, voices sang. Hope was no longer a whisper. It was alive. The leader walked to the child, who sat quietly near the invention, too tired to stand. The leader knelt, lowering himself for the first time. "You," his voice was soft now, almost trembling. "You saved us." The child looked up, his small face weary but smiling. He did not answer. His silence was stronger than words. The elder raised his staff high and spoke to the colony. His voice rang out strong despite his age. "Remember this day. Remember who gave us life when we were dying. Not a warrior, not a king, not a god, but a child. A human child, fragile and small yet greater than despair." The crowd roared with cheers. Their voices rose like thunder across the dead land. The child's invention glowed behind them, mirrors shining, fruit glowing, wires humming. It stood as proof that even in ruin, creation was possible. That night, the colony did not sleep. They laughed. They shared stories. And in the center of it all sat the human child, silent but shining, his invention feeding them all. The leader whispered to himself as he watched, "We thought humans were weak. But this child has shown us what true strength is, not in muscle, not in power, but in mind and in heart." And far above, the stars glittered faintly, as if watching. The story of the human child, who made life from trash, had only just begun. The days that followed were unlike any the colony had known in many years. Where once silence and hunger ruled, now laughter echoed between the broken towers. The invention, glowing at the heart of the settlement, continued its work. Mirrors caught the faint sunlight, wires hummed softly, and each day, baskets filled with golden fruit. The aliens ate. Their thin frames began to grow stronger, their hollow eyes brighter. Children who once lay weak in the dust now ran and played. Their laughter rang out like music, and the colony breathed again. The human child watched quietly from the side. He did not demand thanks. He did not boast. He simply guarded the invention, adjusting mirrors, tightening wires, polishing glass, making sure it never stopped. And each time another fruit appeared, his eyes lit with a small, proud spark. The elder stood before the people one morning, his voice carrying across the crowd. "This child has done what none of us could. He has turned trash into life. He has given us back our future." The crowd roared with agreement. They raised their hands, voices echoing, "Human, human." The child lowered his head, shy under their praise. But deep inside he felt warmth, not from the sun but from their gratitude. The leader, once filled with doubt, now came often to stand beside the child. He studied the invention closely, his sharp eyes following every detail. "You built this, from nothing," he said one evening. His voice was no longer cold but curious, almost respectful. "From broken things we threw away. How did you see this?" The child did not answer in words. He bent down, picked up a bent piece of wire and held it up. Then he drew a small circle in the dust, connecting the wire to the sun with his finger. The leader watched. He understood the message. Nothing is useless if you can see its purpose. For the first time, the leader bowed his head slightly to the child, not as a master to a servant, but as a warrior bowing to a teacher. As days turned into weeks, the colony itself began to change. The weak buildings once crumbling were repaired. Stronger aliens lifted stones again. Children helped carry wood. Mothers planted seeds with hope. The colony was alive with work and energy. And at the center of it all, the invention glowed like a heart, pulsing with life. Each night, the aliens gathered around it, telling stories. Some spoke of their ancestors. Others spoke of survival. But, always, the story returned to the human child, the small figure who had given them life. He had become more than a child. He was a symbol. A living reminder that strength was not only in size or power, but in mind, in vision, in courage. One day, the warrior who had once mocked him approached. His face was hard, but his eyes were softer than before. "I called you foolish," he admitted, standing tall over the child. "I doubted you. I even tried to destroy your work, but you never stopped. And now my people live because of you." The child looked up at him, silent as always. The warrior bent one knee, bowing before him. The crowd gasped. It was rare, almost unthinkable for a warrior to bow, but he did, and he spoke firmly. "You are greater than I." The child blinked, surprised. Then he gave a small nod. It was enough. Soon the invention spread beyond the colony. Other groups of starving aliens came from far across the land, drawn by rumors of food. At first, they did not believe. They thought it was a trick. But when they saw the baskets of glowing fruit, when they tasted life for themselves, they fell to their knees in tears. The human child showed them too. He taught them, not with words but by example, how to gather trash, how to angle mirrors, how to place crystals at the heart. And soon, more inventions rose across the land, shining like beacons. The planet, once on the edge of death, began to breathe again. The elder stood on a high tower one night, looking out at the colony below. Fires glowed. Laughter filled the air, and in the center, the child sat quietly beside his machine, still guarding it, still improving it. The elder's voice was heavy with awe. We thought our world was ending. But this child showed us a truth, greater than survival. He showed us that even in ruin, even in despair, hope can be built from nothing. The leader standing beside him nodded slowly. And it came from a human, a creature we thought was weak. Yet in his weakness, he showed us strength beyond our understanding. That night, as stars glittered above, the aliens gathered around the child. They bowed to him, not as a god, not as a king, but as their savior, their symbol, their hope. The child did not bow back. He only lifted his small hand, pointing upward to the stars. His message was clear. This is only the beginning, and in that moment the aliens knew. The story of the human child would not end in their colony. It would travel beyond, carried by voices spreading across planets and stars. For now, their world lived again. And at the center of it all was a fragile human child who had turned trash into life, despair into hope, and weakness into power. The colony had changed, but the story of the child was not meant to stay in one place. Travelers carried it across deserts and mountains. They told of a tiny human who had turned broken trash into food, who had saved an entire people with nothing but his mind and his courage. In distant lands, hungry tribes listened with disbelief. A child? From Earth? Impossible. Yet when they came and saw the glowing fruits with their own eyes, when they tasted the sweet food, they wept. Everywhere the story spread, the same words followed. A human child saved us. But in the colony itself, life grew richer each day. Families rebuilt their homes, children played without fear, and the old sang songs they thought were lost forever. And always, at the center of it all, was the invention, still glowing, still alive, still watched over by the human child. He had not changed much in body. His frame was still small, his face still young. But in the eyes of the aliens, he was no longer just a child. He was something greater, a legend living among them. The leader, once proud and doubtful, now visited the child often. One evening, as the stars burned bright in the sky, he knelt beside the boy. "I was wrong about you," he said, his voice low. "I thought you weak, I thought you foolish, but you have shown me strength I did not understand." The child looked at him quietly, his expression calm. He did not need to speak. His silence was heavier than words. The leader bowed his head. "From this day forward, we are not only survivors, we are your people. You gave us life when even we had given up." The elder too spoke to the colony one night, his voice carrying like wind through the towers. "Listen well," he said. "This story is not only about survival, it is about truth. We thought ourselves greater than humans, taller, stronger, wiser. But when the time came, it was a human, a child, who saved us. Never again will I call humans weak. For they see light where we see only darkness. They build hope where we see only trash. And for that, we will honor them." The crowd roared, voices echoing through the land. Their chants rose together. "Human! Human! Human!" The child stood small among them, his head bowed, his cheeks glowing with quiet warmth. But then he raised his hand again, pointing toward the stars. And that was when the colony truly understood. He was not asking for praise. He was not claiming glory. He was showing them something greater. The stars above were endless. Countless worlds, countless lives, each with their own struggles. And if one small human child could save a dying people here, what else could humans do out there? The thought filled the aliens with awe and fear at the same time. Weeks later, another storm came, heavier than the last. Dust covered the skies, winds tore at the towers. The colony trembled with fear, worried the invention would break. But this time, they did not watch silently. Warriors stood guard around the invention, shielding it with their own bodies. Children carried stones to weigh down its base. Mothers held mirrors steady so the child could re-angle them. The colony itself had become part of the invention, And when the storm passed, the machine still stood, stronger than before. The people cheered, lifting their hands toward the child, and for the first time he smiled openly, a wide, innocent smile that lit up his tired face. That smile became the colony's treasure, greater even than the food itself. Seasons passed. The colony thrived. New crops grew in the soil, rivers slowly returned, and the invention became more than a machine, it became a symbol. The aliens carved its image into stone walls. They told stories around the fire, passing the tale from parent to child. And always at the center of the story was a fragile human child who had looked at trash and seen treasure, who had looked at despair and seen hope. One night, the elder spoke his final words before passing into the stars. His voice was soft, but every ear listened. "Remember," he whispered, "when the end seemed near, it was not our strength that saved us. It was a human child. Do not forget what that means. Humans are not to be feared for their armies. They are to be respected for their minds. For where we see death, they see life." His words became scripture, repeated across the land, and so the legend spread beyond the planet. Traders carried it into space, to other colonies, to other species. Everywhere the story was told, it ended with the same words. Humans may be small, humans may be fragile, but never call them weak, for one child saved a world. The human child, still silent, still humble, looked at the stars each night. No one knew what he thought, or what future he imagined. But the aliens who once doubted him now believed one truth above all. Humans were different. Humans were dangerous, not because of weapons, not because of power, but because of something far greater. Because when all hope is gone, when the world is nothing but dust and trash, a human will still find a way to build life. And that truth, whispered from one world to the next, would echo across the stars forever.